Welcome to the Liberated Leader podcast. I'm your hostess, B. Chan. Together, we'll connect with leaders in the psychedelic space and explore the creations they birthed into this world, all in hopes to bring the psychedelic renaissance into the 21st century and spread the message of inner healing. Because when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. So, let's get liberated. So today we have a guest with us. His name is Daniel Sitaram Das Shankin. He is the founder of Mount Tam Psychedelic Integration, an organization serving individuals who are exploring their consciousness for transformational evolution within a supportive community. He offers one-to-one integration coaching, and his clients describe his work as profound yet casual, both humorous and reverent. After a deep and intense awakening experience in 1998, Daniel dove deep into his yoga and meditation practice to stabilize his realization in his body and in the world. He began teaching in 2002 and took over leadership of his neighborhood yoga studio in 2004. As a yoga and meditation teacher for over 20 years, Daniel has dedicated his life to the cultivation of clarity, resilience, and heart. He uses tools from a wide variety of traditions to help you develop powerful personal practices for psychedelic preparation and integration. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So tell us a little bit about your intense awakening. Like what sparked it? What happened? What were you doing before teaching yoga?
Drugs sparked it.
Okay.
Right? That's the whole point of this podcast. I had been doing psychedelics young, and recreationally. And as I grew up a little bit, and they were nice to me when I was a kid. 14 years old, 15 years old, it was fun. It was very, chill, weird times with your pals. And then around the time that it was like 18, 19 years old, and I started doing a little yoga practice and learning about meditation. It was interesting because the Beatles were doing it. I was sort of interested, I had my parents' record collection. And, I really liked sort of the promise of the hippies, like their culture and the music and the creativity and the social change. And psychedelics seemed to be a big part of that too. So why not, right? Mm-hmm. And so by the time I found myself meditating, the tenor of the experience started to shift, and they started to become, meditative and transformational experiences. And, until, I had one of those things where the heart opens and you become one with the universe. And, all of the sainted beings throughout time and space who have been working together to make sure that the world make sure we stave off destruction of the planet and keep the human race evolving into a collective of love, like all those guys.
Yeah.
Like, they all showed up and said, hey, we want, you're in, like, we want you, will you pledge your life to do this thing? And I was like, yeah, I'll pledge. Yeah, sure. I will pledge my life to do the thing. It's the honor, it's a great honor. Yeah. And and that was the thing, that was, it's the usual. My story is not that interesting. I'm not that much different than a lot of people.
Did you have to pivot a lot from what you were doing before?
No, I had nothing going on.
Oh, no way.
I was like in college.
Oh, wow.
It was not like I was, and there was no, like, I was a high-powered executive kind of thing. There was just like, oh, I was just a kid in college. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll just do this. And I just sort of, fell into teaching yoga because who else? Because there was not, integration coach was not really a gig. Mm-hmm. And the therapist hadn't taken over yet. It seemed like the people that I knew who were into psychedelics were yoga people and meditators and, Ram Dass and Jack Kornfield and all the, the Roshi Joan Halifax, all these people who did psychedelics, and then they pivoted into meditation, healing, yoga, that sort of thing. So it's like, and to my knowledge, the therapist didn't show up until much later. So it didn't occur to me to become a therapist. It occurred to me to become a yoga and meditation teacher, also because that's the stuff that I knew that I could do that would help keep me in touch with the experience, because I didn't want to lose it. And, Ram Dass said that the psychedelics are like taking a helicopter ride to the top of the mountain, but then the helicopter ride ends and they take you back to the base. And that's painful. And if you want to be up there at the top of the mountain where all the action is, where those, all those saints and sages who are saving the planet live, you gotta climb it yourself. And so I was like, okay, I don't have anything else going on. I will climb it myself. And I'm still climbing.
Yeah. Do you think
I
we can
can't.
ever get to the top?
Oh, I can't see it from here, so the difference, it's like the joys in the climb, I think.
Definitely. The journey, not the destination. Huh?
Yeah.
Where does
You don't want to get hung up on that. You don't want to like get hung up on like, an achievement.
Where does Sitaram Das come from?
Oh, just one day on the mountain, there's this guy named Bhagavan Das who was one of Neem Karoli Baba's first Western devotees. He was the guy, he shows up in the book Be Here Now. He was the one who introduced Ram Dass to Neem Karoli Baba. And, for those of you, I just moved in. Usually I have a picture of Neem Karoli Baba on the wall, but I have him in this book, this guy. For those of you on YouTube, for those of you who are listening on Anchor, just type his name into Google, I guess. And so I was spending time with him. I was spending time in, the yoga community. And, as happens when you hang out in the yoga community long enough, somebody wants to give you a name, and I'm actually, there were people who tried to give me names before, and there are people who tried to give me names since, but that's the one that stuck.
What does it mean?
Well, Das is like, and all the people who have Das on their names, that means servant. So it's sort of like and then the name, what happens, and before that are different names of deities.
Oh.
So, it's like a servant of God in one way or another. And, I'll spare you the mythology, of Sita and Ram. But, one of the things that they say is that when I don't know who I am, I serve. When I do know who I am, you and I are one. So it's like, that's kind of the vibe, is like, if you get lost, do some service.
That sounds so familiar, because last night I was watching the Ram Dass documentary on Netflix, and I think he said the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah. It's like none of it. It's nice to be part of a lineage, because all you have to do is share the teachings of the lineage. You don't have to, it's like, if you find a path that produces relief from suffering or insight and wisdom, you don't have to innovate much. And that might, if you're from Silicon Valley, that's maybe a shock. It's like, oh, don't not innovate. What do you mean? It's like, don't just, the thing, it works as is. Be kind. It's like there's nothing else to do with it.
Sure. You mentioned earlier that kind of like the first wave of people who were into psychedelics were, the yoga meditators and whatnot. And then
in America. The white people in America.
Yes, the white people in America. Yes, you whiteys, yes. And then the therapists came. What do you think sparked that transition?
Well, to be honest, they were there the whole time.
Oh, okay.
Right. To be honest, is that, Tim Leary, Richard Alpert, who became Ram Dass, was a therapist. So, there was the thing called the Harvard Psychedelic Club, right? It's like this stuff came into the hands of therapists and people who are working with the mentally ill for a while. People thought LSD was really interesting. They called it like a psychomimetic. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, in that it produced states that were similar to psychosis. And they thought that was really interesting. And then they could take it themselves and they could have like insight into psychosis that they wouldn't ordinarily get. And so there were therapists who were availing themselves of this substance and were doing some work. But what ended up happening was there were various government crackdowns, right? And so things like, research was put to above ground research was put to a halt. And so there weren't a lot of active therapists or researchers that could be role models for me. And also the one that was, which was Ram Dass, gave it up to do meditation, right? And to do, to work with spirit. And so it was, he was doing the therapy thing and seemed to have found a better way. And so the therapy seemed like the beginning, but not the end. And so it didn't seem like, why would I go back? Because also at that point in my life, it just didn't seem to be the way I wanted to work with clients, work with people.
As a coach now, what would you say is some of the biggest like misconceptions that people or the public have about psychedelic preparation or integration?
Public's a big place. Well, I guess that they don't need it.
Yeah.
I get a lot of calls nearly daily for people who are like, oh, hey, can you give me drugs? Or can you sit with me on drugs? And I was like, well, first of all, no. Like I do prep and integration, and we should spend, like, if you're going to do that, we should spend some time first. We should spend, we should spend a month or two, meet 4 or 8 times and get you into a place where you're really going to get the most benefit. And they're just like, no, I just want the thing. And in their defense, these are people who have often tried a lot of things to relieve their suffering and nothing has worked. And so they are perhaps tired of hearing from people that do this stuff and it'll help. And they're just like, I've tried all the things. I'm exhausted of talking. They're exhausted of talking to people, especially if they've been in like therapeutic relationships. It sounds like I'm trashing therapists, and I'm not. I think I definitely think there's a bell curve, and to be honest, I'm very, very fortunate that in the psychedelic community and like my closer circle, the therapists I know are meditation teachers. They're basically saints. There's a lot of like brilliant, high level, conscious people doing this work. But then I'm aware that there's a lot of schmucks out there too. So it's like, if you're listening and you're mad at me, you're probably one of the schmucks. But so people are tired of talking to them because they've been in therapeutic relationships for like 10, 20 years and it hasn't helped. And they're like, oh, like maybe if I eat mushrooms, it'll help. It's like, or worse, they've been on Prozac or something.
Yeah.
Or some other, the benzodiazepines of some nature for far too long and have been in, and they shouldn't have been. Let's just say that. I'm talking about, there are people that it saves their lives, and that's great. Again, I'm not, it's not always one way. Like, if you're listening, it's not always one way. All right. And I'm not giving out medical advice or legal advice. Don't come to me for medical or legal advice. You'd have to be crazy. But so people have been suffering for a long time and things have not been working. And they're like, maybe this will. And it can, but it's kind of like my dad said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think that's kind of a cool thought, is that and it's like the Zen masters say, I think it's Zen masters, they'll say enlightenment is an accident, but meditation makes you accident prone.
Mm.
You know, there's stories of yogis who do prostration practices.
Frustration practices.
Right, this is where you basically you set yourself up in front of a deity or a picture of your guru, and then you just bow 100,000 times.
Oh.
It can take some time, you know. It's like you don't do 100,000 in one day. You know, it's like, you know, you get 100 or two done a day, you know, depending on how much time you have. You know, some people have a lot of free time, and you know, there's stories of people bowing and bowing and bowing. They get up, they get down, they get up, they get down, they get up, and they get down, and then somewhere in like the 6,000s, you know, they bow and they just like slip into space.
Oh, wow.
You know, they just like fall into God, you know, and then they get back up, and then it's like, oh, and then they get back up, and they're like, oh, okay, and then they do them again. You know, it's like it takes 100,000 to get like one good one. But so the psychedelics can produce an amazing psychic change doing the prep work can support that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always there's always no deal. You know, it's like deal or no deal. You know, it's like psychedelics, they're going to do their own thing. It's not like they don't. Sometimes they, you know, if they want, they'll go along with you for a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe kind of like trying to train a tiger. It's like doing a tiger show in Vegas.
Yeah.
You know, it's like sometimes they work with you.
Sometimes they eat you.
So, yeah. Well, and then of course, you know, they're if you're lucky, they basically just eat what's not you.
How do you think we can get those people to understand that prep and integration work is very valuable?
You can't get anybody to do anything or realize anything. I think that's the cause of a lot of suffering on the planet, is trying to get people to realize things. And I'm sorry to to do wordplay with you, but I think it's really, really important that the people that have the most success in that thing, the thing that is similar to what you were talking about, are people who are just doing their thing with great dedication.
Mm.
You know, and that makes them somewhat magnetic and attractive. I'm thinking of like Paul Stamets or something like that. You know, the guy's just kind of magnetic, and yeah, he puts himself out there in some ways, but he's sharing what he's passionate about. You know, it's like you get the feeling that if the cameras weren't on him, he would just be like talking his friends' ears off about it.
No.
Right. And so there is all of this. I one of sometimes you meet people on the internet and you argue with them. You know, it's like you say something and they're like, "That's not the way it is," and you're like, "Yes, it is." And they're like, "No, it's not." And then, you know, either you hate each other, or you become friends. Um, so I made a friend this way, and I said something, you know, because I say things that are like irreverent and that are sort of my way. Not like my way or the highway, but it's just the way I am. I'm quirky. Um, and you know, he challenged me as like, shouldn't we be doing more to like build bridges to the mainstream? And I was like, why? We're the ones with the psychedelics. They want what we have. And if the and so there's all of this big rush to sort of make things palatable for people. And part of it seems to be to relieve suffering, but a lot of it seems to be a money grab. There's like all of this, there's a lot of money pouring into the psychedelic space. And there's a lot of people who have never done it, or who have like had one little experience in Tulum or something like that. And then they know everything. They went to Peru one weekend. And so they're trying to figure out how to show it to their friends in a way where their friends won't think they're too weird. All my friends are weird. so it's like, I don't know. And I'll be sometimes in conversation with those guys, and we barely speak that we're barely the same species. We barely speak the same language. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just a whole different thing that I'm not good at. I just kind of do what I do. And people, some people find me, and then I just share with them what I have to share. And I think that that's what I would like to see a lot of people doing, is being like super, super confident that they have something cool to share, and then just like share it with the people who are around. And then it'll just spread, because mycelium, like if you look at how mycelium works, it's a just an organic thing that just spreads, right? These ideas of, hey, be kind to one another. It's like, it takes root. It takes root eventually, I think. What do you think of that? How does that land for you? What does that sound like? Truly, because I don't know if it sounds ridiculous or not.
I think be kind to one another. My first thought there was, that's something that we're taught in kindergarten or even preschool, right? But then how far away do we go from that as we enter into adulthood, and as we get older in life, and for us to have to be reminded of that.
Right, because we're afraid the world is a little tough these days. There's people are afraid they're going to starve to death, or lose their health care or whatever the hell, it's like people, like, the world was not designed for kindness. There were articles that came out during like the last election cycle that people had finally noticed that cruelty almost seems to be the point.
Wow.
Right? Like, we live in a world that is in a lot of ways designed around cruelty. And kindness is like a revolution. Kindness was a revolutionary act when Jesus was around. It's like they yeah, they shot Martin Luther King when he was like, why aren't we doing more to help people who need help? They shot him too. And so it's like, yeah, we're in a space that's not designed for wisdom or compassion. It's not our society. And they can pretend like it is, enough, to, I don't know. I don't really even know, except that it's tough to maintain that, seemingly, unless you really try. And you really train yourself, because that's an inside job too, because we're not even kind to ourselves. And then if we are drug users, if we use some drugs anyway, the caffeine people seem to, say it's not the caffeine people, but there's all sorts of stigma right now around drug use, that's internalized. Like, so, people, and if people have been using them for a while, there's like even more, because there's, this is an illegal thing, and maybe this is an immoral thing, and I can't tell my friends. And, there's all of these things where, in the news and in politics, it's like people who need government assistance, welfare of sorts, they're these dehumanizing practices like drug tests, right? It's like you lose government housing if there's weed in your pee.
Oh, wow. So they just randomly drug test people who are on.
In some places in the country, yeah, like you'll lose your government assistance, right? It's like people who smoke weed do not deserve help is the message,
Yeah.
right? It's you're a criminal and you do not get to eat or sleep in a building.
Mm.
And so we're growing up in that sort of mind state, and it's not nice, right? And so it's like the government who we're supposed to turn to show us how things work is just not nice.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll see that turn around in our lifetime?
Well, it is to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's starting to a bit. I mean, the decriminalization measures are not nothing. It's a big deal. You know, the people who are working on that are saints.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, you know, and some of them have intense personalities. And I'm sure, you know, if you look at the um, psychedelic news sites, you know, a lot of it's politics, right? And so the people who are working in politics have a lot to hash out. And sometimes it appears to get personal. But one of the things that we know from using psychedelics is that there's personality and then there's like spirit. And so like some of these people whose their personalities don't always jive doesn't mean that they're not like, you know, like warriors for truth and justice underneath it all, which is hopeful.
Yeah.
I hope it's hopeful.
What are some advice or reminders for people that are wanting to go on their first psychedelic journey?
Relax as much as possible. And as a practice, like dedicate time for relaxation. And I don't just mean sitting. Sometimes when I say relaxation, people think that it's trite, like sitting by the pool with umbrella drinks.
Mm.
And that's cool too. But when I mean relax, I mean take time to unravel your neurosis, right? We know like the tension, recognize that the tension in your body is a result of struggle, you know, and that, excuse me, and maybe it's due to trauma, maybe it's just due to like living, you know, things happen, but we're really wrapped up in survival. You know, it's like we're really wrapped up in making sure that dangerous things don't come our way. We're really wrapped up in making sure that good things do come our way, that we're making sure cool things are happening for ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And we often feel confused, we feel out of control, and that creates tension in the body. And so finding a way that is a little bit wiser to look at your world so that you're less of a victim of it and more of a co-creator in it is huge and will perhaps give you an opportunity to release deeply held tension in the body. And that all of that whole thing is the sort of that whole thing is a lot of what we do in integration coaching. You know, it's like talk about those things and let those things unravel and put together some practices that will enable you to, you know, look through the body for the places where the tension live and give it a chance to come up and release.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a bit more about what exactly is integration work?
Mm. Several things can happen when you get really, really high. And I hope your people don't mind that I'm not using medical terminology on purpose. You know, it's like I'm perfectly capable of saying several things can happen in therapeutic psilocybin sessions. I don't want to say that. Several things can happen when you're really, really high, and you can learn a lot about the way you've decided to see the world. Right? So we've all decided to see the world in a certain way, and we've decided to see ourselves in a certain way, and the people in it, we see them in a certain way, and we have all of these ideas about the world and the people in our lives and ourselves. And many of those ideas are limiting and unhelpful and false. And it can be and then, so that the thing about those ideas is that then we live our lives based on those ideas. And then, oh, the world is unfair. I don't know. I'm not worthy of love. How about that?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not worthy of love. So let's say you go running around living your life as though you're unworthy of love. It's like, what do you think you're going to create for yourself? It's like, it's not going to be particularly baller.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you might recognize, oh, what? Wait, what? I am worthy of love, and that was just sort of like a coping mechanism based on like a weird thing that happened like 1 month at my house when I was a kid, or a year, whatever it was, a year. And I am worthy of love, and then you'll not only will you kind of have that thought, but you'll feel it, and you might actually like open up. And so the other thing that like psychedelic people know is that the universe is kind of made of love, which is nice. Like it's good that it's good. Like that's handy. um, and so you can open to it, and then it just rushes in. I was like, oh wow, it's like I can just like open, I can just sort of like release. That's the other thing about relaxing the tension. When you half of what the tension is doing is keeping out the love that is all pervasive in the universe. Right? And so just like stop doing that. Like stop keeping out the love that is just like oozing out of every pore and square inch of the simulation that we're in. And so you might have that realization, and that's one thing, and that's cool because you can remember it, because those are words. The universe is made of love. I'm worthy of love. I can open to love. Great. And then the thing is those words refer to an experience. Like you have that experience, and then you sit in that experience and you're like, wow, I should remember that. Let me write that down. The world is made of love. You write it down. And so then you go out of, whatever you are, wherever you're doing it. Let's just assume like you're in, your friend's living room and you guys built yourself an altar or whatever. Someone's cabin by the water. And then you leave the cabin by the water and you go back to like Baltimore. And then you have to like do Baltimore things with like your job, and like you're surrounded by a bunch of people who don't realize that the world is made of love, and they're not acting like it, and they are giving you pushback because like stuff has, just because the world stuff has to get done. You didn't hand your TPS report in on time, and people hassle you, and like you don't really want to be doing TPS reports anyway, but that's the life that you're in. Everybody's got to be somewhere. One of my favorite jokes is a Jerry Seinfeld joke. There is a woman's having an affair, and she's having sex with this guy, and she hears that her husband's coming home, and the guy doesn't know what to do, and so he runs in the bathroom and he pulls the shower curtain closed. He's in the tub naked, And then the husband comes in and he has to go to the bathroom. So he goes into the bathroom and he hears a noise, and he opens the shower curtain and there's this guy standing there naked. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And the guy says, "Everybody has to be somewhere." So that, I think, is sort of like what it's like to wake up on psychedelics.
Mm.
You know, it's very much like this, you know, it's like, how did I get here? You know, everybody has to be somewhere. And so you just, it's hard to hold on to that because there's stress in the world. And there's some of that's internal and some of that's external, because just because you have an experience, it doesn't undo, you know, the 30, 40 years of programming that's been going on in your life, just programming you towards hatred, programming you to believe that you're not worthy of love. And so integration is the practice of taking that experience and growing it so that it starts to be in charge of your nervous system instead of your self-hatred.
In my experience, I definitely have had those really powerful, emotions and visuals and whatnot on my trips. And, I, right afterwards, I think I do a good job in integrating it, but, after a few months, it definitely starts to slip away a bit. So what are some, kind of practical exercises that we could do on our own to elongate that or to revisit it?
Revisit it. Yeah, it's put down your phone long enough to be like, oh yeah, that was awesome. And recognize that it's not that hard to get to. Right. So remember what we said, like, so if either every square inch of the universe is permeated with pulsating love or it's not. Right. So if it's not, then what the hell are we doing? If it is, it shouldn't be that hard to get to. Right. Either you're like an infinite goddess of light stuck in a human body, or you're not. Right. That's the other thing. People are like, oh my God, I was God. It's like, yeah, you're still God. You're just sort of like focused on doing person things. And so, if you are like truth and consciousness and bliss at your core, right? So that's what it shows us, right? That's the overwhelming report that comes back from people. I realized that I was just like pulsating truth, consciousness, and bliss, and that I always was and I always will be. So don't pretend like it's hard to do that. And don't pretend it's hard to do that when you don't even try. Right? It's like, and so the more you do it, the more it'll be there. That's what Charles Bukowski, right? Even Charles Bukowski knew. Let me find that Charles Bukowski poem, The Laughing Heart. Can I read you a poem?
Yeah, of course.
The Laughing Heart by Charles Bukowski. Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There's a light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life sometimes. And the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight in you. So read that poem every day.
I think it's a really good poem to remind people of there is darkness, but there also is light. So it's kind of like your choice on how you want to be viewing things and viewing your world.
Know it while you have it. And the more often you do it, the more light there will be.
Mhm.
You know, it's like this is one of the things that I learned on psychedelics. It's like you sit there and this is kind of like everybody's got to be somewhere. Like you wake up and you're like, oh my God, this is like 700,000 lifetimes of like bullshit that I've accumulated of like pain and hurt and like bad action, like rude things that I've done. It's not because one of the things you see is like not just like, oh, poor me, the world has done all this stuff to me. It's like I've done a lot of rotten things too. And I've got a lot of bad habits and I'm like a mess and not cool to people sometimes. And there's like all those times when I was like selfish and thoughtless and like that's all in my lap. And your choice is to like either like start cleaning it up or just carry around, it's like you can either clean up your shit or you can smell like shit. It's not gonna go anywhere on its own. And so that's what some of integration is too, is just like cleaning up that mess.
Yeah.
Sometimes you come out of these things and there's like half a dozen people you got to say sorry to.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a couple of weeks, make a plan. Don't just call them up while you're stoned and say, I'm sorry. Give it, talk to a coach or a therapist about it first. Make a plan for how you're like not going to freak out your exes.
Yeah. 100%. Daniel, I know you have one kid or two kids?
One kid.
One kid. How old?
It's going to be 2 next week.
2. Okay, super young.
Yeah.
At what age would you let him or her?
Here's his popper.
Oh, geez. Oh, I played with those before. At what age would you let her do psychedelics?
Him? At what age would I let him?
Him?
What will the landscape be like for people who want to do psychedelics in 10, 15, 20 years?
Mm.
Right? I don't know. Are there going to be these like meditation center, skydiving places? You know what I mean? Like where you get a little license, you take a weekend course, you take like a motorcycle course on like how to drive a motorcycle safely or something like that. And then you get to ride your motorcycle.
Mm.
I have no idea what it's going to be like. It's not going to be, I had to like take buses into like bad neighborhoods in the city. I grew up in, kind of middle class suburb. We would take buses into like the city to like scary parts of the city that like we like shouldn't have been in. I guess everybody has to be somewhere, but that was the thought. That was the thought. So it was like, oh my God, if our parents had known, they would have been like really freaked out. And then that's where we bought dime bags of weed.
Mm.
Sometimes we'd get it from, other places, but there were times when it was just like, that was the easiest thing to do. And we did it. So I really don't want that world to be the world he's in. There's really no bus. Like we live in the middle of nowhere. There's no bus like that where we live now. I can tell you that my kid is going to be well educated on those things. There is a mushroom foraging group in town, the Berkshire Mycological Society. And this guy, John, who's been going out hunting for mushrooms like 40 years, takes people out. We all look for mushrooms. And I took River on his first forage. And, he had a little basket. We found a bunch of, little brown mushrooms, a bunch of LBMs. And he's so happy, and he took him home and he showed him to mom, and we're sitting on the floor and looking at these different mushrooms, and she picks one up and it looks like almost like a little like a Liberty Cap, but it's not. And she goes, is this one psychedelic? And my 1-year-old looks up and goes, not psychedelic.
Oh.
And just looks back at the mushrooms. Like I was like, he knows that word.
Yeah.
He's like he sits on my lap sometimes. Like I'll be on phone calls and meetings. He's sitting on my lap. He knows he knows everything. Like he catches everything. And he's probably going to have a really weird sense of humor, and he's going to be really well educated about how um, sacred our consciousness is, and what it's like what cognitive liberty means, and how to approach our minds, and how to take care of ourselves on a lot of different levels. But it's not about me like unlocking the door to like Willy Wonka's mushroom factory. That's not how it is. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I don't know, 17? I don't know.
Give me an age. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I think that's a great, household to be growing up in, with a parent so heavily involved in the industry, and then like kind of learning by osmosis, like the safety and the things that you should be learning about in terms of doing psychedelics.
Right. And granted, like he's also, I mean, he's in a house where, he's going to be learning about like Ayurveda.
Mm.
Like, he's, sits with his mom, on like meditation Zoom meetings. It's like there was the other day, this was cute. We were on a thing, and we're sitting, how when sometimes you sit in meditation, your hands are on your knees. And they said, okay, now we're going to chant some ohms. And so she starts chanting Om, and he runs over to her and says, Om hands.
Oh man.
And takes her hands and wants her to put her palms together in like prayer pose. Because that's like, he's like, usually, if we're, a lot of times when we're chanting Om, the palms are together. And so it's not just a psychedelic kind of thing, it's like we were hopefully raising him with a lot of different things that are going to contribute to his health and well-being.
Holistic is the word that comes up for me.
Sure. Yeah. He knows the difference between pores and gills on the underside of a mushroom.
I don't even know the difference.
Yeah, like it's like he will be able to identify food and medicine, before too long, that grows, in our neighborhood.
That's great. Imagine, like a generation of kids being raised in households like that.
Yeah. Well, they're out there. It's just it's not enough, because it's a small town. There's not a lot of people here.
Amazing. Before we go into lightning round, where can our listeners connect with you online?
Oh, come to TAM Integration. I have all the social properties. TAM integration. TAM is a mountain, Mount Tamalpais in Marin. So tamintegration.com. If you go to TAM integration /prep class, and I think we'll put that in the show notes, I have a free mini class. There's classes and things you can buy on the website. There's a free one called a mini class on meditative preparation for a day of mushrooms. And you'll even get to see River. He's in an ergo. I'm carrying him around when he was very young. So he's featured in the video too. And every Wednesday night on Zoom, we do have integration circles, and they're by donation. Every second Thursday, we have like a beginner's Q&A. And on the first and third Thursdays, we have women's circle. There's probably going to be some more stuff happening at some point. So in February in Berkeley, I'm doing a 3-day workshop. So you took my class, Sitting for Psychonauts. I teach a class on meditation for psychedelic users, and we're doing a 3-day one in Berkeley, February 18th, 19th, and 20th. And so if you want to like hang out with me all weekend, if it's not sold out by now, it might be sold out by now. I don't know. But it's a great, it's a great class. People seem to really, really like it. People kind of take it again and again, and it's going to be good to be able to hang out with some of these people from all over the country in person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get in touch with me. Lightning round sounds freaking fun because it's sort of a metaphor for both, like that flash of wisdom, right? Like the Buddhists say, the flash of lightning in the darkest night is this kind of like spontaneous insight. Then I also associate it with like because LSD kind of does that.
Oh,
Gives
does
you
it?
the flashes of insight.
Insight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Well, this is how it works. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and you can answer with the first thing that pops up in your mind.
Okay.
Okay. What is your go-to yoga?
LSD.
What's your go-to yoga pose?
What's my legs up the wall?
Like that. Yeah, okay. Down regulated. Is there a specific meditation practice that you do?
A body scan.
What's your hidden talent?
Shoot rainbow colored light out of my hands that heals people.
Okay.
I'm a decent cook too.
That's good to know. What's the latest lesson that you learned?
The relaxation thing really, it's like really like a thing for me today.
Okay. What's your favorite psychedelic?
LSD.
Let's see. Mine too. Usually a lot of people just say shrooms.
Yeah.
What's the biggest limiting belief that you discovered about yourself?
Probably something about like anger solves problems.
Okay. What's your favorite quote?
The Bukowski thing. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it.
And last one here. What do you want the world to know?
That it's made of love.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you and getting to know you more and to hear more about your work and the things that you do. I really enjoy your calming presence.
Really? Okay, cool. I'm glad.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being an inspiration to all of the aspiring liberated leaders out there. I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Akita Agency. We transform overwhelmed healers into liberated leaders with our signature Akita Liberation Loop method. We help psychedelic therapists and coaches evolve from a one-to-one to a one-to-many client model by co-creating evergreen funnels that lead to online courses and group coaching programs. We have a special gift for our listeners, a complimentary, bite-sized training series to level up your evergreen funnel knowledge. If you're not familiar with or feel overwhelmed with marketing, sales, and funnels, then this training is for you. Just go to akitaagency.com/tutorial. Thank you for listening to the Liberated Leader podcast. If you found value in today's episode, then please, 1, leave us a positive review, share it with a friend. 2, join our tribe on social. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, to your liberation and beyond.